Yeah, so we're talking with Tanya Ankovic. Now, she is a speaker, she's an author, she's a mentor, and this woman knows all about change. She has been through a lot in her life, and we're welcoming her to the show. Hello, Tanya.
Hello, how are you both?
Oh, we're great, thank you.
Yeah, if
Good.
anything, our life has been rather devoid of change in the last couple of weeks. What with
I
same
know.
same routine. Maybe that's the opposite side of what we're talking about today, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, we're going to talk about how to go through change smoothly.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
Yeah,
Mm.
so you have been through lots of changes in your life. So maybe you could just start by outlining for us all the various things that you have had to cope with.
I won't go through them all because we'll be here all night, but I'm going to give you some of the big ones, some of the really big ones.
Okay.
And it was grief, really, to be honest, not being able to conceive. I so wanted babies all of my life. And then at 32, when my then husband and I were trying to have children, it just didn't happen. It was a shock for me because I just never thought that it would happen to me. And it was 8 years of going through the grieving process of
Wow.
letting go of a dream. And, you have to change your identity a bit. You've got to then go, okay, if this isn't going to happen for me, if I'm not going to be a mum, then who am I? And what is my purpose in the world going to be? So that was a massive, massive time for me. And so I hit 40 and I said to my then husband, Phil, if I'm not pregnant at 40, then I'm just going to give up and I'm going to focus on something else, just see how else I can serve mankind. And as it turned out, 3 months after I made that statement, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Wow.
And it's interesting that the moment he was diagnosed, part of me let go of the whole inability to conceive very quickly because I went, oh, now I understand the bigger plan. And I was able to let that go, and Phil passed away 5 months later. It was a very aggressive cancer. But I then understood, maybe there is something greater for me to do in the world that I don't even know about, and I just have to trust the greater plan here. And so then at 40, I had to then go through the grieving process again on a very different level and go through the whole self-identity process again. Okay, I'm now not even a mum. I'm not even a wife now. And what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So it was a very big time of change. My life was there was a turning point, and that's when I had to then rediscover Tanya. Who am I in the world again? So, yeah, those are a couple there, big ones there.
Big indeed. And as you mentioned, even for the first journey with infertility, that was a 10-year journey as well. And so tell us a little bit about what that was like, because I know people have heard of things like, there's the stages of grief and things like that, but it's not just like a linear kind of progression when we're working through this kind of thing, is it?
No, definitely not. It's really cyclic in a way. I often also call it the tsunami. Grief kind of comes in these massive waves, and then you get knocked over by the wave, and then eventually you come back up again and you're bobbing away again in life again, and then you see another wave coming. But what happens, this was my experience, what I found was the waves became further apart and they were less intense. I could see them coming though sometimes, and I'd go, oh, here we go. And I allowed myself to go with the flow of grief instead of resisting it and running away from it and, running into other things that we all do, whether it be alcohol, food, drugs, relationships. I allowed the grief to come and allowed myself to just whatever happens. So I think that was a big thing. Everyone's different. Some people just stay in a place of denial for a long time because it's too painful. Everyone's different. I always say that grief is like a fingerprint. It's different for us all.
So you've been through some massive things, the fertility issues and then your husband passing away of cancer. I mean, they're really big. I mean, that's tough going. Like, how do you get through that? Did you ever sort of feel yourself sinking all the way down, or, what did you do to keep yourself up and buoyant and still kind of carrying on?
Well, look, the short answer is I have a deep faith in God, and I really believed that he had a purpose for me and that I was to be here for a reason. So I had that deep, deep belief. One thing I did do during that period of grieving over the infertility was I went and took myself off to study to be a therapist. So it was during the study of being a therapist that I really got into the full grieving process. And, some people say you go and study to be a therapist in order to heal yourself. And I do believe that was part of my intention. I then, with all of the learnings, in a way, when Phil passed away, I was like an observer. It was as if there was another me looking from above, looking at Tanya, the grieving widow, and go, oh, okay, she's going through that process now. So it was really interesting that was what I did. I really observed how I grieved, and I went, okay, this is what's going on for you. But truthfully, without my trust in God, knowing that I was being carried, I don't know how I could have done it, really. That is the basic foundation.
And how do you find, when I look at the scope of how faith can be there for people as they go through things as well, it's always heartening when you do hear of how, people's faith is that rock that's there for them. But I've also observed on occasion, and I'll say this for myself as well, sometimes you go through challenges and unfortunately we use our faith to beat ourselves up as well. That I should be, people say things like, rejoice in the Lord at all times. And you're like, yes, I should be happy about, I should be okay. I should be. What were some of the things that you learned about how to make sure that, your faith was that strength to you and not maybe something that became an anchor or something that was less helpful to you?
I allowed myself to not be perfect. I allowed myself to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And after I made the mistakes that I did during the grieving process, I learned how to forgive myself for them. So that was a big thing for me because, part of me thought you should have known better. You should have known better. But, it's not until you're in that deep grief do you realize how vulnerable you are. Do you realize how loneliness can impact your decisions? And you don't have that personal certainty. You're still looking to others. Tell me what to do. Show me how to live. Humans. So it really was a learning process. It was very much about being kind to myself during that process. I journaled a lot during that time, and I got a lot of it out on paper, which then became my books, interestingly enough. So that was a way for me to cry out to God in my writing, but to also observe what was going on for me. So I kept quite a detailed journal of what was happening for me emotionally. That really helped.
Did you have friends and family that perhaps withdrew from you because they just didn't know what to say or how to handle you anymore?
They didn't so much withdraw. I've got a very strong support network of fellow therapists. So I was very lucky there. No, I can't say that people withdrew. What I did find, though, is my grief brought up other people's grief. So if people would phone me, I would often find that I was counselling them because I could identify that they were grieving. But apparently this is really common. So, people just don't know how to face grief. And it's something that we all as humans, we want to run from pain. So often when people would call me and they would look at me even and they'd start crying and I go, it's okay. But I really do believe that my faith was what enabled me to then help them through their grief. And I suppose there was a part of me that wanted to be strong. I wanted to be strong for my late husband. I wanted to be strong for God too. Show me how I can best serve you.
And so what about the difference perhaps between, when we're going through changes and the things that happened to you were two things that you didn't choose that weren't, necessarily results of things that you had done. And so, there weren't like consequences of that. And sometimes we go through life and we make choices for ourselves that turn out to be, not so great for whatever reason. Is there a difference in maybe how we approach those things sometimes? Because I think when life comes at you, at least you can kind of say, well, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong here. Other times when we're trying to make changes and maybe we did make some choices and things that, we all make mistakes, but in the heat of the moment, maybe we're not as gracious with ourselves as we could be. Is there a difference to how we can approach those, or how we can maybe help others too who might have made some bad calls in their own lives?
When something happens to us that's out of our control, I found acceptance was the key to everything. Acceptance and surrender to the flow of life. And I would always say to myself, I'd go back and read stories of other people who went through similar things in life, and that gave me the strength to know if they can do it, so can I. They've been through something horrific, they found meaning and purpose again, and they were able to contribute back to mankind. And so that was the story that I held on to. That was what gave me strength. When it came to making a bad decision, well, I learned from it. I encourage people, learn from it, forgive yourself for it, and make another decision. But maybe before you make the next decision, work out where you want to go. Work out what it is that you want in your life before you make that decision, so that you are making a decision that will get you on the right track. So often when we're left floundering in life, we go, oh, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. But it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall and let's just see what sticks, So know what you want. Know what brings you joy. Know the outcome that you want. And when you know that bullseye, then that will enable you to make a decision, like plugging the coordinates into the GPS, right? The GPS will take you there in the fastest way. So that is what I encourage people to do. If you've made a wrong decision, okay, tack again. And learn from that one. Maybe it was a decoy, but then make another decision. Get back on the track again. The main thing is that you don't give up.
Yeah, so you make these bad decisions and then you refocus and you've hit the bullseye, you know what you want, but then coming right at you is the freight train of fear of failure. And you're thinking, oh no, I made that massive mistake last time. Now I'm doing something new. What if I fail? I mean, how do you reconcile that in your head?
Well, what's stopping you is only the fear of failure. It actually hasn't happened. So I always say to people, worry about something when there's something to worry about. And even when there's something to worry about, don't worry about it. So it's fear. It's the fear of the anxiety of what might happen tomorrow or next week. I always encourage people, stay in today, do what is put in front of you today. Is this task, what you're going to do today, going to get you to that final outcome? Yes, it is. Great. Get on with that today. Those 2 days of the week, yesterday and tomorrow, they're luxuries. Yesterday keeps you in the past. Tomorrow's going to keep you in fear and anxiety. Don't go there. Just stay present in today and keep remembering what your final outcome is and do what is in front of you today. Will this get me to the goal that I want? When failure comes up in your thinking, it is a discipline. Just recognize it as a fear, but also create a different story around the word failure, or even don't even use the word failure. And just if you notice that fear is starting to flicker around in your head, that voice in your head, then just go, oh, hello, fear. What are you here to teach me right now? And acknowledge it, make friends with it, dance with it. Don't let it rule you.
It reminds me actually of a quote. I think it was Seneca, going all the way back in the BCs. He said, we suffer more in our imagination than in reality.
So true, isn't it?
Yeah.
So true. When you think about all the things you worried about, did they actually happen? Probably not.
Yeah. And so what about those who are looking to make a step as well? Because I think, we've talked about being on, a change has happened and then what do I do? Sometimes we're in a position where we want to make a change and we just don't. We don't know which one to do. Like, again, the number of times you hear, people say like, oh, what's the right thing to do? And I've often said to people, like often we make moral issues out of things that aren't moral questions. Like, what's the right job? It's not like there's a,
Yeah, and I think as Christians as well, we sort of think, what does God want me to do? I don't know. I don't know what he's saying to me.
Yeah, so how do we take that step?
Give yourself the time to be still and listen during prayer time. Often we are so busy. We ask the question, what do you want? What do you want? But we don't listen. And I always find that those intuitive feelings that I've got are always spot on. I always say to people, follow your joy. What brings you joy? What do you feel is your purpose in life? What makes your life have meaning? What are the things that really excite you, that create passion for you? And if you go, well, I don't know, then, well, what used to? What are some of the things that used to? And, if you knew, that famous quote by Dr. Schuller, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do?
Mm.
So it's so often people say, we're climbing the ladder of success, but we've had the ladder up against the wrong wall. So it's about following joy, letting joy be your GPS. Otherwise, again, we aren't listening to our own instinct. We aren't living a life that we feel will really fulfill us. There's a difference between achievement and fulfillment. And so many people who have achieved in life and accumulated, etc., they get all the dollars in the bank or whatever it is that they want, the trophies, and they go, gosh, I'm not really fulfilled. So start there. But part of that journey really means going within and learning who you are again. Who am I? Who do I feel? Sorry?
I was just going to say that's so good, Tanya. Really, really helpful stuff there. Just a last question. Any advice for someone who is supporting somebody who is going through a difficult change? Because I know it's really easy to say, oh, you'll be fine, you can do it, it's just kind of those sorts of little glib statements, and the person's thinking, well, how do you know I'm going to be fine?
There is an art to listening. Most people just want to be heard. They don't want advice. They just want to be heard. So do that first and let someone speak. Let someone open up. Build that rapport where they know they can trust you with anything. And I always encourage people to learn to grow their self-confidence, their self-esteem, self-worth, so that they can learn to trust themselves and make decisions with certainty. Quite often people say, what do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? I always encourage people to start learning how to trust their own instinct. But first, just give someone an ear. Let them know you are here to listen.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you so much, Tanya. You have been wonderful. Now, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or check out your resources, where can they go?
Well, I've got a website, tanyaunkovich.com. I'm all over social media, and also my YouTube channel has got all of my past Radio Rema interviews on it. So you can learn quite a lot there. There's a lot of resources there just in the form of our interviews.
Oh, that's great. And we'll put a link on the pages there as well. So thank you so much, Tanya. Have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thanks, Tanya.
You are so... Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.